I'm Dink Clark. Are you ready? I'm Dink Clark. I was 85 this past January the 7th, and I have so far good health except for my eyes, and very thankful for that. I was born here on Chincoteague. And the year I was born, they were walking across the bay here to Franklin City. Horse and cart. My mother always reminded me of that. I was born in that freeze. That was 1918. Huh? Well, I don't know much about it. That's the year I was born. Huh? Well, they said that it was first a lot of them were a little dubious of trying to walk across, but then there was a steady stream. They said people going back and forth from here to Franklin City because that's where the train line came in that time. They had to depend on a lot of their stuff coming over here by water, and that came down to Franklin City, and then they ferried it across by barge over here to Chincoteague. But they went across and got some of their own stuff during that freeze, I hear. We played ball, played out in the woods. We'd play all kinds of games and do a lot of climbing trees and robbing a little bird's nest. All kinds of
What's the earliest thing that you remember, Dan?
doing.
What's the earliest thing that you can remember happening?
I remember. I think of course, I might not remember this because it's related back to me so many times, but I vaguely remember my aunt died, and my mother heard the word, and they were very close. And I was 4 year old, and I remember she grabbed me by the hand and running back to my aunt's, and she had died through childbirth. And I can remember that, but I'd say I don't whether I remember that or whether it's been related to me, and it's like it happened that I remember. They all worked on the water. Yeah, yeah.
When did you start going on the water with them?
As soon as I could, I went early, as 7 or 8 year old. I used to rush home from school and try to sign me a few clams and make a penny. Nickels was a lot of money in them days. Well, everybody on where I was born on the east side of the island, they all worked on the water. In fact, that was the only occupation on the island just about at that time. They had a few storekeepers, and beyond that, they all pretty well depended upon the water for a livelihood. Well, it wasn't very lucrative work, but that's all we knew. And on here, on the island around here, a lot of them stayed and they had almost depleted the clams in the areas around here close by. And we all go down to Bay. It was a little journey from all the way, you could go all the way to Cape Charles. But most time we went about Hog Island. That's about off of Willis's Wharf, if you know where that is, and Exmoor and then play, adjacent like, and that's mostly where we went. Wade clams. We called it wading clams. Now they call it treading clams. And then the fall of the year or cool weather, we signed clams. They make a little hole in the surface. And I remember one incident. I just happened to think of this. Did you know Wilmer Clark? Anyway, his wife had a brother that came down here, and he was wanting to go down to bay with us. He was very green, like he didn't know anything about it. So they told him, you have to feed the clams every night. So, all the clams would go down to the hold of the boat, and everybody put them in one heap because they trusted each other. And have a lot of leftover bread because we baked our own bread. And they give him this cold bread, and he'd go in there and crumble all over the heap. And then when he was to bed, Les Hickman would go with this draw bucket of water, dip the water up and wash the breadcrumbs down through the heap. You couldn't see it. He'd get up next morning and he would say, boy, them clams can sure eat. So when he caught on, I thought he was going to kill somebody. He got so mad when they told about him. Well, the guy in charge would have you to come around and, you'd help him, load on some supplies, and most time at that time period, we used a little, I think it was called a pet stove, but burn wood. And then later on, when the propane gas came along, which was later, way later, they started using that for the summertime. But we would go down and sometimes, most time at the early season, early part of my career, like going down to bay, was around Wetumpka Bay, because that was where all the eelgrass, and you couldn't step your foot overboard there without stepping on a scallop, little bay scallops. And when that eelgrass died out, and all the scallops disappeared also. But that was the best clamming. Like at one time, we had, I think, it was about 20 some boats, and they ranged in crew from 2 to maybe 6 or 7 on some of the larger boats. And that was, we'd tie up alongside each other because it was calm, and you could walk across 10 or 12 boats and visit and on the high tides when you weren't working. Uh, we had they had a table, they have like little eye hooks, in some part of the cabin, and you hook the ends of the tables. It was just maybe a 4x4 table, and you took each end and tied the other up on the ceiling, the line, and hold that, and then it stayed in place. All you did was just hoist it up, and we eat on that. And oh yeah, a lot of times, yeah, we would eat, yeah, clams and oysters. We make clam chowder, and oyster season we would fry oysters or make stews. And couldn't make stews very well. Well, you could make it because we use canned milk, but a lot of them rather have the oysters fried. And I remember one time though, me and Shan McGee, it was winter time. We went down and was storm came up, a northeast storm, and we couldn't work. And the tide came up really, really high, and it was in late November. And no, I mean, it was early December because we were going down to try to get a Christmas trip. And this tide came in, and we didn't have no gun or nothing, but when I tried to get us some Martians, and blowing so hard the Martians, they're not strong flyers anyway. They would go a little ways and pitch, and we would pull over quick to them and get them diving. And we caught, I think it was 20 something like that. And him and we ate off Martians for the next week. We stayed down there over, extended over the week because we didn't have nothing to go home with for that week, that first week. So we stayed over, and that saved you from burning up the gas and all, going back and forth again. Outside of that, I have no more experience. Huh? How did they keep their houses up? Oh, mostly wood. And they did have some coal burning, but they used mostly wood stoves. They had the coal stoves to sit by, but now they had, yeah, they had the coal oil, what we call was kerosene. We had them. Yeah, my mother used to just use that in the summertime, and so the heat wouldn't be hot inside the house. They had a lot of times they had these quilting parties, and they would be visiting each other, and each would help the other make a quilt or Afghan or whatever, most time was quilts. And then they would make our cotton flannel moccasins, for wading clams with. And they, I think they would get 9 what we call slippers out of a yard, and they knew how to fold them up and sew them. And my mother sometimes would get me to fold them so she could just stick them in the sewing machine. She had an old foot pedal machine, but she could handle it. Huh? Yeah. It's had a nappy on one side and like a rigid, like little grains of, or not grains, but streaks, like it was cotton, but I don't know how they made it. But, corduroy effect. Yeah, like a corduroy effect almost, yeah. But you turn the nap side out, it wore better, on the, it wore, if you turn the other side, it would cut easier. But because you were in a lot of shells, but you learned how to piece them up and whatever, heel and toe them, but that wouldn't be very comfortable when you were doing it. It's a card, and if you were on what we call slick bottom, just muddy or no shells around, you could work all day long on one pair. And if you were in shelly, rocky bottom, we call it, you could wear out a pair and 4 or 5 pair easy. Yeah. We used to, it was more clams. You could catch more clams than in the shelly, rocky bottom because the shells and all protected them. And also protect them from the fish and, other things that ate off them. But for the cotton flannel, the stores here carried it. Well, I guess you'd call them, but just local grocers, and they all carried that. After a while, they sold them already made, but they were a lot higher when you bought them like that.
Fabric specifically for?
Oh no, no! I don't know what other thing it was used for, but that's what they found that was the more reasonable to use and cheaper and whatever. That's the only thing I ever. Now later on, they did some of them had bought those wetsuits. That was later in years, and they had already booties like with them, but they had to wear them clamming because if they cut a hole in them, they lost their purpose, of because they'd start leaking on them.
Did you ever go ashore to Cobb's and run into them when people lived on there?
Yeah.
Go ashore weekend?
Yeah, I got caught on there.
You would tell us about that.
I better not tell you about that because he never did catch me.
Still alive?
Huh?
Is he still alive?
He was a game warden. I imagine he probably may be. But I was up there gunning, and they had told me that what type of boat he had, and I had a little dock down the end where I'd dock my boat, and I said the next time I go there, I'm going to not go to that dock because that's the dock he uses. So I docked my boat way around where I could go down and jump in there and tuck off, the other way. I don't know whether he was. I think he had heard some shooting there, and he came on and check it out. But anyway, I didn't go back no more for a long time. I was gunning, but you were not allowed to gun on there at that time. Duck hunting. Gene can tell you a lot about that. He's an old duck hunter. Sometimes you did, but most time they were there. I guess they got something to feed off of there that would lure them there, and you just go sit near a pond or whatever. And after a while, down near dusk, they'd come in on you. The ducks would. Uh, they had some home remedies that most of the thing. I remember one time I did have to go ashore. I had a toothache so bad, and that was at my Tompkin, and my father said he can't stand this anymore. I was really in pain, and so he took me ashore, and the nearest thing was a doctor. There wasn't no dentist; it was a doctor, and he said, "Son, are you brave?" I didn't know what he was meaning, must. He said, "I haven't got nothing, but I'm going to yank that tooth out of you." He said, "Put your hand down under the chair and hold on." I did. I wanted anything because that tooth was just driving me crazy. And he yanked it out, and nothing, no Novocaine, no nothing. But it was partially loose, I think, anyway. And I didn't hardly feel it when he yanked it out. That's about the only time I know anybody had, go ashore for an emergency or anything.
Shore duty in the Coast Guard, were you stationed on any of these islands?
No.
Where were you stationed?
I was stationed mostly up in the New Hampshire, New England area, mostly around New York Harbor a lot. And now, when I first went in, I was stationed down to Portsmouth on a buoy tender. See, we didn't go to boot camp right away, and we had to wait for the boot camp was at Ellis Island, New York, and they were just remodeling it or fixing it so we could make a boot camp there. So I put 6 months on the Orchid, the buoy tender, and then went up and went through boot camp. Now that was interesting because the immigrants were still there also, and they took half of the place and renovated at a time, and they slowly got rid of the immigrants and transferred them wherever, I don't know. But we ate with the immigrants a lot. Huh? Oh, that's another incident. Walt, Walt, your uncle. Uh, we had a bad northeaster, and we went into Willis's Wharf, and it didn't change, and we went in because we couldn't do nothing. It was in the summertime, and the late summer. So they said, well, we may as well lay over here and not go home, not take the boat home, and we'll come back Monday morning, maybe the weather will change. Well, come back Monday morning, northeast are still going strong. So me and Walt said, let's go down to Norfolk. We had just about enough money to get across there with, and on the ferry, and sign up for the not in the service, Merchant Marine. And when we went down, this recruiting officer spotted Walt. See, he was about 6'4" 4 then, and said, "I want you to come in here for my football team." And we didn't even get to the Merchant Marine, where it was all in the post office building down there to Portsmouth. And I said, well, I knew a lot of boys here had been in the Coast Guard. I said, I think I'll go in the Coast Guard here, Walt. We got our call. We went, he signed up for the Navy that day, and I signed up for the Coast Guard. And about a week later, we both got our call, same time. And he went on to Quincy, I think, after he started. And I remember I visited him when she came into Brooklyn shipyard, and I thought I was lost when I got aboard her. That was the biggest ship I'd ever been on. I was 21. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I didn't. We were going to go in the Merchant Marine because we figured we couldn't get into service. We didn't figure it'd be hard or whatever. But that was 1939, and just after we got down there, everything was Coast Guard, Marine, and Army, all in this post office building. It's a government building, had the recruiting offices. And so Chincoteague boy there spotted me, and he says that he was in the Coast Guard. He was a recruiter. I forgot who it was, or he said it. I forget his name now. But anyway, we both signed up that day and got a call a week later, both at the same time. Now, it was a few times that they came out. A lot of times they make excuses that they have a breakdown, save gasoline. You would get the Coast Guard to tow us, and, but most of them wouldn't use it that way. It was a few of them would, pretend they were broke down and get the Coast Guard to tow them from one station to the other till they got all the way back. Save that gasoline, when they had a look at them days. If you cleared what we call cleared after you paid your grub bill, and if you smoked or whatever, and if you cleared $2 or $3, you had a big week. You thought, is that bad? Uh, where we bought that here, we filled up with gas before we'd go with the boats. They would most time they had like a portable, like a truck would come down, had a big long hose, and they could come down on the docks where the boat, if the boat where they were docked at it, they would go to a special dock where they could, be reached by the tanker or truck and put their gas aboard. Now some of them took 5-gallon cans and furred it and poured it on their own boat. Well, it depends. If you thought somebody was kind of not too sanitary, you didn't want him to be cooking for you. So my brother, you could brag on. He was a good cook. He could stir up something out of nothing and make it taste good. And if you bragged on him, boy, he'd go on. But while I was me and Zed Lewis went down with him, and he had false teeth at the time, and he'd put them in this cup. And the ants, we would look in there sometime, and they'd be covered. You couldn't even see his teeth, the ants. And he'd take them, blow them off, put them right in his mouth, and go on. So I didn't want him to be any cooking for me. In fact, we'd see him go board. He said, "Boys, I'm going to go board and start up a meal." They said, "Well, we're all going." We wouldn't let him go and even attempt to cook because didn't want to eat after him. It was bad enough because you were, you didn't have water to waste, and a lot of times you would wash your hands in the same water somebody else did if he wasn't really too dirty. But it was a lot of hardships. Any what? Spices. The staple stuff we carried down the bay would be bacon and eggs, canned milk, potatoes and onions, baked beans, canned baked beans, pork and beans, and corned beef and a can. That was mainly what we depended on. And then if you catch a fish or you wanted, clam chowder or clam fritters. I wish I could make clam fritters like my brother did then. They were really good. But that was about it for each. And he could stir up like I don't know how he did it, but we did have some vanilla. He took along, and he would stir up like vanilla pudding and have the take cocoa and make pudding. We did take some cocoa sometime. It depended if you had like a lot of people, they wanted the cheapest grub bill they could get because it was hard, if you come in and if you try to add some little bit of extra stuff, somebody would say, "We don't need that. That's expensive." I went down with my brother and his wife one time. And then I went down with my sister and her husband one time. Everett, I went down with Everett and them one time. No, they just went along. They didn't do anything. They just went for the company for the man, I guess, and just changed the routine, I guess, being home alone. Yeah, yeah. Uh, Later on, some of them, I think, went a little bit, but not very much. It was a little bit too rough for them to rough it, on a. Then you had no privacy if they went on the boats. But most time, well, in the summertime, we'd try to get our trip through Thursday. We'd go down early Monday morning. A lot depended on how the tides were making. If you could get early morning tide and late afternoon tide, you could have a right good trip because you'd get two tides in. But then when the tide made in the middle of the day, you only got that one tide. Except in the summertime, we would go out at midnight at night and clam. And that's why they would really pull the jokes on you. Somebody would slip up alongside of you, and it'd be dark, you couldn't see them or nothing, and he'd have that oar overboard, and he'd take that oar and propel it like, power and run it right in your boat. You'd jump in your boat, think it was a shark or something. They every other week they it's like if it's low tide this week, say 7 o'clock in the morning, a week not next week. Next week we should roughly be 7 in the afternoon, and then the following week it'd be back to that 7 o'clock. And I mean that's just rough. A lot of things that has control of that, winds and moon and all, and like a northeast wind can throw everything out of kilter. Well, see, to where the clams are more plentiful, it would be over your head for the treading clams and the high tides, and you waited for the tide to get down so you could get overboard and have your feet on the bottom, and then the same thing with the oyster. We call them oyster rocks or flats or whatever. You needed that day of dry so you could go and pick them up off of it, and that's why you needed the tide. The low tide, the only time we high tide be like after we came aboard. If you want to go maybe try to catch a fish or something like that, we'd do it on the high tide.
Okay, good.
Do you have a computer, Bernice?
I have one at work. I work
Oh,
on
yeah.
work all the time.
Oh, yeah. Do you know Kathy Ruth's niece? Ruth Johnson's niece, or Ruth Patrick? She works over there. Uh, I forget her husband's name now. His name's Jerry, but I forget his last name. They live down in right back of the Pines Lake. Uh, yeah, for one while there I did. Yeah, like I went down one time, like in the winter. Me and Dump Hill and Johnny Lewis. It was just three of us. And then the other time, in the winter time, I went down with Shan McGee. Oh no, no, you went down to Orstron then in the colder weather. Except if it was like in the fall or the spring, not real cold, you could sign clams. Now at that time period, the big clams were worth more than small clams. I'm talking about way back when I first started working on the water. Big clams brought 3 times the price of the smaller clam. Now it's just the opposite. The little nicks or whatever cherries and what brings the price.
How do you stay away from here when you're serving?
I would get home at least once every year most time, but one time was about 2 years, I guess, that was away.
Come right back home when you got out?
Yeah, yeah. I drove a tug around New York, and I knew New York Harbor very well. And this McAllister Towing Company, they had this fleet of tugboats that pulled the ships around, whatever. And they told me, said, Ben, I got talking a lot of times. Why don't you apply for a license here when you get out? Said you could easily pass it. And I thought about it, but then I said that would be the old rat race right over again, And so I want to get back where I was born, raised, and whatever. And so but see, I've had a good outlook on it because at that time the oyster disease hadn't gotten the oysters, And my father and my brother both had a lot of oyster planting ground, and I thought, well, I could do right good with my pension, from the Coast Guard and just fool around with that. But that soon didn't pan out too well.
What was the best trip you ever had down the bay that you can remember?
That was later on. That was after I come back from the Coast Guard. I went down, and I was going down with Johnny, and that would be in the early 60s, about 62, 61, 62. I found this place of clams, and I caught 5,200 one day. A lot of clams. And I think that was about the best trip I had, because I had over 12,000 clams for that week. And that's summertime. And we had maybe a couple more, but that was the biggest one. And that wasn't really big, because you didn't get a good price for your clams then. Later on, like I'm speaking now of when I went down with Johnny, me and Johnny and Dump, we had an old refrigerator, and we'd buy a half a keg of what do you call it?
Cake.
Cakes, and that would last us all week. And then we could take some like hamburger or chicken and put it in there, and then we'd have a little better eating. I'll tell you an incident now about Johnny Lewis. Do you know Johnny? Tight, close, goodness sake. Me and Dump, we all like little sweets, like cookies or something. So this was, when you get a little better stuff to eat. And on the way down, going down, we would look when we got down there, and Johnny had almost ate all the stuff up, like the cookies and all on the way down. So Dump said, we'll fix him. We'll order double next time. And same thing happened again. So we ordered triple the next time. He said, my lands, boys, that's going to be a high grub bill. We said, well, maybe we'll get a little bit of the cookies this time. Yeah, he would eat them all up himself. And another thing, when we had the chicken, we had to do the same thing with the chicken. He loved the breast, which I'd like to have any other part just as well. But anyway, when we had this chicken, he would go right in and grab 3 or 4 big pieces and not hardly leave you nothing. So anymore, when we cook, we put each man's and his plate, like equal it up, because if you did, he was greedy and tight. Boy, he was something. But he got fixed because of that, though. We were selling at that time to Tom Reed up Depot, our clams. We come into Quinby, and they needed clams bad. George Ed Bell, I think his name was. He dealt in clams there. And they offered Johnny, and they offered all of us maybe $1 or $2 more than 1,000 when we were getting home. And we said no, because, he's depending on us when we come home. But Johnny sold to him. And Tom Reed found it out when we went up. Where was Johnny's clams? And Dump told him he wouldn't buy Johnny's clams anymore. And Johnny had to go around, and we'd have to go to different places for him to sell his clams for the longest kind of time. So he went up and apologized to Tom and all, and then I think it was a year before he did. No, he didn't. Well, they would notify the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard would come out to you. Now that's happened sometimes. Yeah, some of the guys, they do have to be put ashore and go home because something happened home that they need to be home for. Yeah.
Well, was there like like you said you went down there and there were several boats that would go down
Oh,
there?
that's one time when in Wetumpka Bay there, where I said all the eelgrass was and the scallops were so plentiful. I think it was 20 some boats there at one time, one trip. And but most of the time you'd go down and maybe be 2 or 3 boats lay together, in company with each other, and it's at that time after what I'm speaking about, when all them boats were, a lot of people that's all they depended on working on the water, but slowly they left the water and they went to other jobs like the base, started up and like that. Then it wasn't many people going down the bay. Maybe when I quit going down, there was only about two or three boats that went regular. Oh yeah, yeah. And that was another thing, you would learn who to trust, because the captain of the boat, and you put your clams in the hole, like say, you trusted the other guy to give the right count. Say he caught 500 and you want him to have 500 that he put out. The captain would put 500 down. And also for one while there, we separated them. And that time, like I said before, the big clams brought more. But they slowly weeded them guys out because when we went to put your clams out, the guy, we sold to, he counted them. And if you would be short, this guy had just come aboard and, and you had to have no shortage prior to that. You knew who to suspect. So you kind of tell him, we don't need you no more. But they would do it.
So you grew up on Chincoteague. Talk about growing up on Chincoteague a little bit. And I'm going to ask you to stay in one place,
Oh,
one or the other.
oh, okay. Yeah, you got me focused right now. I'll try to say like this. Uh, I don't remember too much of, uh, we find something to do to occupy ourselves, like games or something. And, like baseball, we couldn't afford to buy a good baseball. We'd get an old, one that had been forsaken by the school or something, and tar tape put around it but we would, enjoy it.
Did your mother work outside of the home at all, or she just worked?
At one little while there, they had the tomato canning factory here, and a lot of the women worked there, and they, I can remember some of that. They'd get a little copper token every time they'd take their bucket up after they took the peel. They peeled the tomato, the skin off, and they canned it, and that's the only thing my mother. Oh yeah, we did like go strawberry picking and strawberry time. That'd be a whole family, two or three families go and go and we go from year to year to this. They used to raise a lot of strawberries down the county here, but then they got into other industries and yeah, went to. But you would go down and I forget now how much they paid you. It wasn't very much, but it was more than what we were making on the water at the time. Somebody would have a truck that would ride the truck. Yeah.
Was there
In what way you mean?
I don't get
Oh yeah. When I remember, it was about three families there. It was what we called him Old Man Ben Scott. He lived over there with him and his wife, and then they had the late house keeper. Was two families there, the Collinses and the I forget the other ones, Cullens. Uh, they were, and then oh yeah, and then Wash Ellett, he lived over there too. It was four families I remember.
Jones.
Huh?
Jones.
Joneses.
Jones, some of the Jones still live over there near the end. Roy Jones,
Uh, no, they didn't live over there, but they worked over there. They would go down, they would take their boat over and walk down the cove and clam.
Do you remember when people started moving off of the island? Was there any kind of a
Off as
drop?
they
Yeah.
no, they my grandfather he had a little furry thing there for bring the school children over when and I drive with him on that sometimes, and he would but see I had just to get off the same time period as they did for to go to school. But I just went for the ride, you know. I didn't go for to help him with anything. He was a contrarian thing anyway. He had an outhouse that everything he'd save he had in there, I think, and all kinds of. And I was really crazy to get in there. And one time I caught him gone, and I broke, I think the lock, or I broke something, and I got in there, and sure enough, he come home before I got out of there. I was just poking around in there, seeing what's what. He gave me a little bit of thrashing. I didn't bother him stuff no more. Yeah. No, we had radio. We had a radio pretty sharp. My brother bought a radio, and then after I went to service, I got acquainted at the ball game. I got acquainted with this guy who had uh, the franchise for what was some of them first televisions?
Philco.
Philco. That's what it was, Philco. And he said, we got acquainted this ball game, and he told me where I worked. I said, well, how much, you know, I didn't know much about him then. He said, I can sell you one, being that, you know, you're in service and all. He said, well, I said, my brother always wanted one. And he sold me one at cost. And Clarence come up and got it. And now that was a big deal at that time because he had one of the first televisions on Chincoteague. But we would go down to Harry and Clarence Fraser when they had the store. They all had radio, and we listened to Lum and Abner and Lowell Thomas and all them for the news, and Gabriel Heater. Oh, I was pretty green. I was green enough to spend my first paycheck in the barber chair after I got out of boot camp. We only got $21 a month, and that was paid you twice a month, every 2 weeks. And another crazy to get a haircut and shave and all. And as soon as I got ashore there, see, we were on Ellis Island at the time, and I went ashore there to we called it the barge office at South Ferry, and went across this barber shop. And he says, do you want the works? No, I didn't know what he meant. And first thing I know, hot towels on my face, and one was manicure on my fingernails and all. And when I was paid for it, it felt nice, you know, and all of that. But it took almost my whole paycheck that I just got paid. I think I think they told a little bit out for clothing, whatever. But I think that was $7 or $8, and that was a lot of money for me then. But that learned me a lesson. When I told some of the boys, they did share a little bit back with me. They said you ought to have more sense than that. Yeah, I remember one incident. You know, Hip Shot, we off of Birch, and we were cousins. And my brother-in-law, Lige Hill, he liked to play jokes on you, and he made wine almost every year. So he saw me in, it was winter time, and he saw me in Hip Shot, well, they called him Hip Shot, and said, come on over, boys, I want you to try some of my wine. So they got a new batch, and he poured out a little cup full to each of us, and he said, that ain't gonna do you no good. Here, hand us one of them quart jar pictures, said, see who can drink it the fastest. Well, we drank that, and then we decided to go out on the water oystering. Well, when I been over, I have to catch myself like that. We soon come on back, just staggering around. We were hip shot saw a couple of these old milk cans, and you could stomp your foot down in it and make it like a skate. That glade now, it's where oh it's not, and this is now right across from the new hardware store now. You know, like the glade. We when we met, the ice went barrels and up the here in water all the time. Hip shot, come on, follow me. Fall down, both drunk and I don't know what. Lodge found out that was my brother-in-law that gave us the wine. He like laughed his head off. And we were afraid to tell our parents because they went up on Lodge and give him the dough. Yeah. We were about 14, I guess, then.
What was what were like the social interactions between um guys and girls?
But the only thing is they'd have picnics sometime and from schools and you know, you'd go on them together and we'd go to Astig sometime and you'd try to get the girl off by herself or something and
Of course.
uh, no, that was about the only time that you know, except in school, you know, you could they would do some crazy things in school to the girls. And you, Gladys Williams, do you remember? She married Marvin Merrick. Barney Jester, you remember Barney, don't you? We sat opposite each other in school. You know, he sat on this aisle and I sat on that aisle. And he said, when Gladys comes by, he said, you grab hold one side of her dress and I'll grab hold of the other. Well, we did, and we both stood up. And there's a poor girl standing there with nothing but her panties, you know, on and off. And that teacher spotted us, and she didn't know what to do. She was dumbfounded. The teacher said, both of you come up here to me, you know. I went up there to her, and so hold out your hand. She had a paddle. She gave us a little paddle, but the whole classroom was nearly dying laughing, you know. And then she didn't. Teacher a little flabbergasted, a little. But that we shouldn't have did. But you would just crazy kids.
When did you get electricity out here?
Oh, I don't know exactly when. I remember we didn't have it for a long time. Used what we call kerosene lamps, and I do know that we had it before I was, I'd say 12 or 14, something like that, when we got it, I think. And then we had outdoor toilet facilities. That was another incident I can tell you about the outdoor toilet. We had used old Susan Roebuck catalog for your toilet paper, and you would try to get slick pages. All you didn't want them because they didn't make too good of a tissue. But anyway, we traded around. 3 or 4 wee boys used to like these Western romance, you know, cowboy magazines, and we would trade them around. So I forgot who it was that I got his, and I'd never read it. And I went out to we call it the outhouse, and reading that book, and I fell asleep. And Mom and Pop didn't know where I was. I was about 12, 13, I guess, something like that. And finally, I guess they thought they looked everywhere, and they come found me in the toilet, found asleep.
And when did the movie theater come? Remember?
That was there pretty early. Yeah. I got a piece on there, what they used to play when the horses were, you know, the westerns they show mostly when the horses in a trot. That William Tell, I think it's William Tell Concerto or whatever it is. Yeah, that came pretty early because Hipshot, see mother, when she died, like I told you before, my sister, my mother's sister, he went to live with my grandmother, and then from then his father was married again. He married almost immediately, and they flitted around to different ones, and he didn't have hardly anything. They lived really. I mean, we all lived bad, but they lived really bad. And remember when the theater, talking about the theater, it was I think a nickel or I forget now exactly which, but Hipshot didn't have hardly anything. And he wait till the movie started, and he'd go up and he'd say, "Tess, I ain't got but 3 cents. Take it or leave it." And he'd take it and let him in, and he would get to see the whole movie. But he'd miss a little bit the first part. He wouldn't go and try to do that till after the movie had started. Yeah, we were young when they had the movies. Yeah, I don't know when cause I can remember the movies. I don't know when it came really.
Did you have any big events, like 4th of July things or anything on here then?
Yeah, we had the Coast Guard mostly did those, between several different Coast Guard stations up and down the shore here. They would have competitive, all kinds of rowing and man overboard things, and then capsizing the boat and righting her, and then have the rowing races, and that was mostly in.
I'll go out in boats and watch them, or stand on the shore, or just went out and watched them.
Just stand on the docks down here and watch them.
Remember any of the big storms?
Yeah, I remember that 33 storm.
Yeah, tell us about that.
I think I was about, well, you can figure 33, and I was born in 1918. That's 15-year-old, isn't it? Uh, I was living back, where my homestead is, back a higher tower store down that lane. And when that storm came, we didn't think it was going to amount to much, And then it shifted around to southeast and blew almost the whole ocean in on us. And it was up to here in my yard, and come up to our third stair step, going upstairs. And all of the down the bay boats, they'd broke loose from where they had them moored at, and they were scattered about everywhere. And a lot of them, they didn't even bother. They just junked them. They was cost too much to get them, righted or towed back into water. They didn't have much of a means to picking them up either. Most of them that did get the boats had brought down these rollers, and if they had, good solid ground, lift them up some kind of way with the block and tackle, and put rollers underneath them and try to roll them a little ways at a time, then change the rollers. Some of them did get back in the water that way. But, golly, what a mess that was, home there. It left when that water receded and, house dried, I bet you we had 2 inches of mud in every room. Boy, what a mess. Well, you couldn't do much. You couldn't do much about it. I mean, yeah, they didn't give you the hurricane warnings like they do nowadays. I mean, they overdo it now because they worry you to death that's going to be worse than it is, and they predict this year is going to be a lot of them again. No, they like I say, they may have over the radio gave you some warning, but it wasn't much you could do. Now I had a little what we call bat tow, and as the tide came up, I had her down at the dock, and I brought her as far as I could, and then bring her a little further as the tide came in, and had her tied to a maple tree there in the yard. And I said, if it gets too bad, we can go to higher ground all the time. Now that one, I don't know of anybody that left the island then. They all were, weathered it out, and There's we got it worse on the east side that time than that other storm that ash wind. They got it more on the western side of the island. Not really. Remember a lot of fights. So, no tragedies.
What about really happy memories?
Huh?
What about really happy memories?
What?
Happy time.
Happy times. I think the happiest that if I would make a buck, save it up and bought myself a new suit of clothes when I think that was I'd saved up, from working after school and whatever, and the bad part of that, I bought it from Spiegelmayer Stern catalog sales, and you could buy two pair of pants, you know, and when I had that suit, I had put it on this. Forgot it was a it wasn't a memorial. I forgot what day it was, but it was a special day anyway. And down at the Seaview Casino, they had a bowling alley down there, and I had these crepe sole shoes on. And when I went to bowl and come to a stop, that they fetched me right up. I burned a hole right in my new pants, new brand new suit, the hole. But I had two pair of pants, and I didn't tell my mother that I got two pair of pants with it, but I just threw that other pair away, and because it was ripped so bad that it was shown. I don't think he could have done anything about it. But I kept that suit a long time. So I remember even now it had pleats in the back, the side pleats, and had like an arrow coming down, in the end, and all the light gray. You could get good stuff at that time and through the catalogs, a lot better than you could around here.
How much was that? How
Hmm.
much was the suit?
It was less than $20. I forgot how much it was, and it seemed to me like it was $18 something. I could be wrong, but that's what I think it was.
Ain't a lot of money then, though.
Oh, look, I saved up that whole summer, after school working, and then my brother, he would take me with him sometime, Clarence. Clarence was a very good waterman, and he would show me some things, and then he'd find out you take this, and he would like help me a lot of ways like that. Well, some people have some knack for doing something better than somebody else. Like shucking oysters, say for instance. Some people can shuck them twice as far. I wasn't very good. I could open nice looking oysters, but I wouldn't say I could never made a livelihood. And some of them just like this, flipping. And then like Shan McGee, he was a very good on the water. I mean, clamming, oystering, anything. Like he could. I remember one time when I was with him, he showed me some things I never knew. Like these, they are terrapins, and they bury up in the wintertime. And my sister used to love them to death. They have the meat. It's almost like white, like a chicken breast meat. But anyway, they bury up, and Shan could tell me right where the terrapins were back in these bogs, like, and they leave some kind of a sign there for him, and he said that's one there. But like finding clams, now he shared equal. See, we went down to bay. We were just the two of us, and he would beat me bad, but shared equal. Well, he would just show me. He would let him stay there. You know, he'd push him back down to let him bury. They would bury to keep out the cold. But home here, they would. Miles Hancock, he had a tarpon farm, and that was a delicacy. They used to get a lot of money shipping them. And there's one place there in New York specializing, and I've talked to people since, and they said that was one of the highest things on the menu. But then they got so they just people knocked off from it. Well, I could think up some more lies. I'd tell them to you.
It's hard to think about it when somebody's asking you questions like that.
Yeah, well, I was thinking things over, you know, trying to remember some incidents. You know, when you told me maybe some of the questions, but I forget a lot of them. I think the scariest one I had, and that was dumb. Me and Ed Birch, you know, Ed Paul Tall Pines. We didn't have any good anchor, and me and him, I guess we were Ed was about a year or so older than me, and I was a year or so older than Ipshot. But we were cousins. We went fishing this day, and we didn't have a good fishing line, you know, and trying to go from one place to the other real quick and pull in had an old part of an engine for our anchor. And my fishing line got caught up in the anchor next time, and I was letting it slide through my hand, you know, the anchor, putting an old board so we could anchor right in this. It said, "This is where Uncle Andrew called him last time when we'd anchor right there." I was letting that slide through my hand before it was a long ways before it hit bottom, and that fishing line come down and caught right in I got a scar here from it now, where it went right in that tendon. And how dumb we were. It looked like you could pull it out. So I said, "Ed, you pull on that and I'll pull on this." And he pulled, and that just set it in deeper. I had to go in, and the doctor, he cut it out, but he did give me the Novocaine that time. He put all kinds of stuff in it. But he had to push it, cut it out, and then push it up and clip it off, and then pull it back out, clip that beard off. That's but dumb as I don't know what, trying to pull that out. I thought it just ended a little bit because it didn't hurt much when it first did it. Huh? He did it too? Did you have to have it cut out? You didn't try to pull yours out though, did you? They did?
Everything, but I couldn't get it out.
Yeah, mine caught right. Well, you can see the scar there yet. Right in there. And
They had they had mine. I had a kite on mine, a great big kite.
oh
I
my.
was trying to get it, but he jumped and he jumped and nailed it.
Oh, that's how you got it. Yeah, I was letting the anchor slide through my hand. I fished two winters with Dutchy Jester mackerel fishing in the wintertime. And the most I made out of that, I think, was I went behind on it anyway because Bill Booth. A waterman is mainly dependent on his livelihood from the water. That's what I would term as a waterman. And most of the waterman has the knack for being able to net fish, clam, oyster, tongue. I see that I never did do that, and a lot of them use long steel, what we call stale. They could go in deep water with them and and tongue up clams and oysters, but that was too hard to work. cages. Oh, that's I guess from the sea clan. Oh, wow, that's crab pots. Yeah, you mean wire cages? Yeah, yeah. Well, we didn't do it at that time period. I don't think anybody when I was growing up did, try to sell crabs because you had no market for them. See, now they got crab picking houses, and then they just have places to pick the crabs and ship the crabs and whatever, shed them. And no, that could have been a good thing if just like scallops, we couldn't sell the scallops when I was growing up. They were so plentiful, you couldn't step your foot overboard without stepping on a scallop. And we didn't. We ate them, but there was no market for them. And but if somebody had been smart enough to find a market, I know they could have found a market somewhere in the cities because the cities at that time they didn't get good fresh, seafood no way. And somebody had been smart enough to look into that, they could made a fortune. A lot depend where he'll grow a lot faster. I say he, which always term as he. Where it's sandy and near the ocean, near the inlets, and good, like hard sandy bottom, like he'll grow a lot faster than he will on the mud. Or you can see that he grows faster because you can see the yearly growth, the edges, the little circles like, and he goes pretty fast.
Like how fast?
I think the most I've seen is maybe half an inch for a year's period of time, but you put on that, he grows it all together like, but you can see the growth, they open where the shell opens, and that section of it.
So from the time a clam is what born.
Or they spawn, well, these people that's farming now, how long does it take them for like 2 years from the spawn?
From a grain of salt to
Mhm.
the 50 cent.
I picked up one day out the cove there to show you how many clams if they all lived. Just right on the edge of the bank, and just picked up a handful of slowly, and I bet there was 100 clams there, little, not even big as your fingernail. And the crabs and all eat most of them before they get hardened up, so they can protect themselves. That's why in Shelly Bottom, where the spawn happens to hit, and lodge, they live a lot more protection. And crabs the same way. You'd be surprised how many a female crab will, spawn out little crabs.
Fish, everything.
Yeah, but I guess the ecology takes care of a lot of that. I wish we would do something with the deer on here for the ecology. Huh? You're kidding. Hmm. Hmm. Oh boy, they're around other places.
I'm getting ready to plant a rose bush again. Try a rose bush again.
I got a little garden out here, and I haven't been bothered lately, but I didn't fence it in that first year I had it, and they just went around everything off that was edible. They got.
Week before last, I seen five go right across here right in front of you.
Yeah,
Right across the ice cream. Right
yeah.
across the ice cream.
They love that. I think they like that water trough that they get over there.
Quarter of 6.
Yeah.
Every morning, things go across.